Welcome to the DynastyVipers ViperCast. This is episode 13-ish. Last week I tried to do a one-man show on Periscope, which did not end well. It was a lot of me talking and a lot of people not listening. So this week we brought in the big dog here, Dr. Turner. We're going to talk a little bit about some injuries from last week and some players coming back from injury and if they can help you during your playoff push. As always, Kelvin, he's down on the bottom there. He's with me this time, so I don't feel like I'm riding solo, and I got a little bit of a buffer here to work with. So, Dr. Turner.
What's up, guys? How's it going?
Not too bad. I think you can notice here, I think last time you were on with Kelvin, he had some microphone issues and some camera issues there. We were giving him a hard time way back when, so
he's in
a little bit better shape than before.
Always giving people a hard time. That's kind of my MO at this point when I hop on a pod, especially a live one where I get to see you and everyone else can see you too. Love giving people a hard time. Yeah, man, I tell you what, week 14 was a wild one for me. It's like every time I look down, it was like, hey, what do you know about this guy? He just got hurt. Hey, what do you know about this guy? He just got hurt. And I was just like, holy crap. This isn't like the third string wide receiver. These are like legit contender level players that are no longer going to be able to continue contributing to fantasy teams for this season. And that is just, I've got teams where I'm looking at starting basically backup, like fourth string wide receivers, because there's nothing on the waiver wire. I lost 4 guys in one league that were starting for me last week. I won, but I don't feel like I won. I definitely feel like just the absolute injury apocalypse, which has made my time on Twitter very busy this last few days. So it's pretty brutal. It's been a brutal week.
Well, I think we all got a big shock right off the start there in that early game with Mike Evans. First play, got a touchdown pass, 61 yards, and then the sniper got him. It looked like he blew his hamstring out on that play.
Yeah, it is. It definitely does. And basically everything we've heard since then was that it was a hamstring injury, and they're looking at shutting him down for the year. So unlikely we see Mike Evans, maybe slight chance, maybe comes back if you have a week 17 playoff. But again, this team isn't completely out of it. They could still sneak into the playoffs. So that is the only thing that's giving them hope. If they lose this week without him, there's a good chance he ends up on the IR.
One of the other guys I noticed earlier on too, who had been almost fantasy gold for a lot of owners, was DJ Chark. I think it was a foot and ankle. He was in a boot there, and he's probably likely done for the season, or at least a few weeks.
Yeah, that's another one that I think that really just I think there's going to be a lot of playoff teams with DJ Chark on him because he was so cheap. So he was basically there's a lot of good teams that had him as like a wide receiver 3 and were just steamrolling people. I had him on a few leagues, and that's one of the ones where I lost 4 guys in 1 week. It was Chark, Evans, and then a few other guys I'm sure we'll talk about, Marvin Jones and gosh, why can't the Rashad Penny? So, I mean, I had 4 guys starting that I all lost in 1 week. But yeah, Chark was dealing with an ankle injury. Walking boots aren't usually a good sign. Sometimes they'll put them on there just so that they can like get around the stadium and they're not on crutches. But again, not a good sign. All the reports coming out on Chark so far is that, he's dealing with kind of a foot injury that's week to week. I don't play around with foot injuries. Very unlikely with how poorly this team has played. I think I saw a tweet where they've got like 5 straight blowout losses at this point in a row. Very unlikely we see DJ Chark again. Probably the only bright spot for this team outside of Leonard Fournette on the season. So, I would say Chark is probably done for the year as well.
And this is a big one for fantasy owners. This is the win and you're into your finals in a lot of leagues. And he would have had the Raiders this week, who know a thing or two about blowout losses in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, this one hurts. I mean, again, because there were a lot of teams. I know that I had a couple of teams that revolved around him being a super strong wide receiver 3 week to week, and just giving you basically you could trust him not to give you a dud But also you could get a 30-point week out of him week to week. So the fact that you're losing that, there's some good teams that are going to lose this week because of these injuries, and it really is a shame that they're all hitting us all at once, especially at this point where we're in the fantasy playoffs, and it seems like teams that look like juggernauts a week ago are now looking very vulnerable. So I think you're going to see a lot of really good teams on paper losing this week. Just because of the injuries have just decimated a roster. Calvin's like, heck yeah, man, that's all my teams.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I'm thinking. Devontae Parker had become a part of like a lot of my teams. Now I know that's concussion, so that's not necessarily something that fits in like with these ankle sprains or like with the hamstring injury like Evans. But a guy that I had actually stashed that I was hoping I could use in week 15 because he's got a great matchup against Miami is Daniel Jones. So what about that ankle injury? They called it what do they call it? Like a minor high ankle sprain, which I didn't know that was really something that could exist. But what do you know about that one?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like anything with a sprain. The severity varies from injury to injury. So, you can have a mild high ankle sprain. It's still a high ankle sprain. It's still significant. Mm-hmm. They're saying 2 to 4 weeks. Again, this is a team. If he's truly your franchise quarterback, what are you playing for? Why are you even trying to win games right now? You're looking at possibly pulling a Dolphins and playing yourself out of a guy like Chase Young, who could actually make a difference for you as soon as next year. I don't expect them to bring Jones back. I think they ride Eli and let him kind of try to get a ride into the sunset moment. Maybe he gets a win. I was hoping that it would be Monday night, just because I thought that would have been kind of a hey, let's get him one more big win in division. Really crush the Eagles' hopes and dreams there. I was really hoping for that storyline to come out, but it didn't happen. Again, I don't think Jones, given the team's record and the fact that they're not really playing for anything, I don't see any reason why they would risk putting their future on the line by forcing him to get back out there. He wasn't really particularly good. He showed some promise though. So I don't think it's worth risking him getting injured further just for pride's sake. So unlikely you see Daniel Jones. Sorry, you're going to have to probably drop him.
Besides, the Eli Manning's going to try and get his record back up to 500 now, doesn't he?
What is his like overall record, right? Sitting right under 500.
116 and 117.
Yeah,
lost the Eagles, put him one game below 500.
Gosh,
which by the way,
so bad.
That Carson
Hall of Fame quarterback,
touchdown,
Eli Manning.
Really, you think Hall of Fame?
No, I'm joking completely.
There's a lot of people that would argue that he could be Hall of Fame worthy.
I would not be one of those.
I don't, but
I think that he benefited greatly from some very elite defense in the playoffs. See Joe Flacco for further examples.
I think if you put Phillip Rivers on that Giants team, they probably win more than 2 Super Bowls in that period.
I would not disagree with that. Not today's Phillip Rivers though, because he doesn't really look that great either. But definitely back in a decade ago for sure.
So what about? I've been hanging on to Adam Thielen, and he had that where he came back and he was okay for like 5 plays, and then he was back out, re-hurt that hamstring. What do you do we have any more information on him? Do you have any expectations on what he might be capable of doing?
He is a classic hamstring strain where basically the most likely you're going to re-injure it when you first come back. So the first 2 weeks after you return going full speed is when you're most likely to injure it again. The problem is that Minnesota team keeps winning, so they haven't needed him necessarily to, for sure win a game. I think that given the way that the playoffs are kind of shaking out, if they can basically make it in, if everyone else around them starts faltering, they're going to try to prolong this as long as they can. They want him back for the playoffs. The regular season to the Vikings means very little at this point. They, especially week 17, where they're probably going to secure a spot before then. If they get locked into a spot, I don't see any reason for them to push him to come back just because they're playing well with Adam and they don't need him to win. And I'm not sure. I'd have to look and see what they're looks like. They've got the Chargers,
And the Packers, right?
Green
after
Bay,
that.
and Chicago. So we'll have to see. I would say that if they win, I think the earliest we see him is this week. If they win, then I don't think we see him until the playoffs. If they lose, then I think we see him in Green Bay for sure. So 15 or 16, most likely.
I'm looking at this. He was injured, I think, about week 7. They gave him week 8 off against the Redskins. He tried to come back versus the Chiefs in week 9. That's where he played like 2 plays and then blew it out again. So they've essentially given him 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks off in that period. Is that enough time for that hamstring to be close to 100%? Is he close to 100% right now? If he played, would he be effective?
I would say, given the fact that I can't sit there and look and see and watch him run and practice and things, I would say that given a normal timeline for a hamstring strain, yeah, he would be pretty close. I would say anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks is kind of when you feel really good about it. So, sorry, I just got freaked out by that little guy there. He popped out of nowhere and it really bothered me. I was like, but no, I would say he's getting pretty close to 100%, and they shouldn't. At this point, they're mostly just waiting to see if they need to bring him back or if it's just a luxury to have him back.
Do you think he came back too fast? Do you think trying to play there
Yes.
week 8 was a problem?
Yes, and they did the same thing to Dalvin Cook last year. The Vikings need to learn about these hamstring strains. They did the same thing to Dalvin Cook last year where he had a hamstring strain. They I can't remember if it was week 4 or week 5, but one of those 2 weeks last year, Cook popped a hammy, and they played on a Thursday night. And I said before that game, I said, why, if they're making the smart decision at this point in the year, they would sit Cook, play Murray, and give Cook another 10 days of rest and then let him play. Cook comes in. I think he played for a half, like 20 plays in the first half, repopped his hamstring, and then he was out for like the next 6 weeks after that. And I always look back at that as like, what a poor organizational decision to try to bring him back on a Thursday night game, no less, when they could have given him 10 extra days in the first month of the season. And now they've lost him for another half of a season because I don't blame any team for trying to get a player out there, especially a guy of those, Thielen's caliber, Cook's caliber. But these teams have trends. They make just poor decisions. And I do feel like they probably pushed Thielen to go back too soon. And I've never met a player that didn't want to play. So I'm sure he was pushing. I'm sure he was pushing to try to, I'm good. Let me come back.
Right.
And, again, you come back too soon and then you hurt yourself and you miss, you hurt your team even more than if you had just sat another week and really made sure that it was at 100%. So
could that also
explain
why? Could that explain why we're not seeing what we spent a number 1 overall pick on with Saquon Barkley? Could that be why we're not seeing the capital letters Saquon Barkley we're used to seeing? I know he pushed to come back for that injury. There was a lot of talk about, hey, he might be coming back too fast. Do you think that could be playing into why he's not at 100% right now?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I would say that you can just look and see. I'll pull his stats up right now, but I mean, you can see from the point he injured that ankle, when he returned in 3 weeks from a high ankle sprain that was, by all accounts, looked to be more severe than most. He returns, and basically for 3 weeks after that, he was not traditional Saquon. I mean, even still, I don't think we've only had but one game. Basically I'm trying to look here. So I'm pretty sure he hurt himself in week 8. No. So it's week 3. So he got hurt in week 3. He comes back in week 7. He's got 18 rushes for 72 yards, 3 catches for 8 yards. And I think the passing game he's going to give you that most of the time just because he's getting so much volume there. But he wasn't horribly efficient with it. Detroit, their defense was obviously pretty bad in week 8. So he 19 yards for 19 carries for 64 yards, still only three yards a carry. And then you've got, of course, 8 receptions for 79. So he's still Saquon, but he's not that. He hasn't had that Christian McCaffrey level of production. What we saw last year with Saquon, where it was, you're getting 100 yards receiving and maybe 100 yards rushing with 2 touchdowns. Part of that, I think, is the ankle. I think part of it is the team has been really bad. I don't think Daniel Jones has looked good. I don't think that, they're missing arguably their best wide receiver. Their tight end is, Evan Ingram has been hurt all season, which is becoming a trend for him, which isn't a good trend to have with a tight end. See Rob Gronkowski for why that's not a good trend for longevity. But yeah, I mean, we're seeing dud games where we weren't seeing dud games with Saquon last year. And I think that's the difference. He's still going to give you some good games in there, but the fact that he's giving you games that aren't top 10 numbers tells you that he's not playing at 100% right now.
Well, I'm going to circle back to Evan Ingram here in a second, but I want to touch base while we're still talking Minnesota Vikings here. We know about Thielen. It looked like Dalvin Cook handled a full workload. Is he safe now? Is he a safe play? We've seen him handle that full workload. He's got that chest shoulder kind of injury going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think Cook was suffering from arguably what most running backs suffer from at this point in the season, which is just their bodies break down. I mean, especially these guys. We see it with Bell. We've seen it with Kamara. We've seen it with basically every running back in the league outside of Christian McCaffrey. Anyone that's getting the amount of workload in the run game plus pass game, at some point things start to add up. They get banged up, and then you're showing up on an injury report, and maybe you're still playing, but you're not playing at 100% anymore. That is every non-committee running back that's considered a bell cow. I mean, even Zeke, we've seen some him pop up every now and again on the injury report with just aches and pains. So I would say Cook was probably dealing with some of that. Again, the team could go with Alexander Madison. I expected them to this week, but obviously he was feeling better than what the initial reports thought. So they gave him some rest during the week off of practice, and then he felt a lot better. And then you can throw him out there. So I would trust him.
And they definitely were riding Dalvin Cook pretty heavy there for the first 8-9 weeks of the season. A good chunk, until basically Thielen went down.
Yeah.
It was pretty much a run type of offense they were going.
But didn't they have 10 pass attempts in the first week this year?
Yeah, it was pretty ridiculous. And now I just want to circle back to Evan Ingram, because I know when you do your seasonal rankings, when you go into a draft there, Dr. Turner, you have your own kind of set of rankings. Would the news of Evan Ingram this year drastically affect how you would rank him going into next season and for Dynasty and overall?
For Dynasty, I think you have to basically you got to look at his track record at this point. And the track record is showing you that the guy isn't able to give you a full slate of games. When he plays, he is elite. And he looks, for elite tight ends. That doesn't really say much, but he's a top 12 tight end when he's playing. And he gives you, when he was healthy, look at his first 3 weeks. I mean, the first week, 11 receptions, 116 yards and a touchdown. That's elite tight end. That's top 5 dynasty tight end right there. The second week, 6 receptions, 48 yards. Not great, but I mean, still 6 receptions PPR. That's probably a tight end 1 week if I had to look back. The next week, 6 receptions, 113 yards and a touchdown. He's getting the target, so he's getting open. He's got that athleticism. The problem is that, and we saw it last year too, is that the guy isn't staying healthy to the point where you can trust him for a full 16 games. So you have to discount him, even if the talent. I would say this is like Jordan Reed. The talent is there when he's on the field. Absolutely, top 12 dynasty asset for sure at tight end. I don't think that Ingram is at Jordan Reed levels of concern for me. But he's definitely, it would be very difficult for me going into any given year to trust him as, a top 7 or top 8 tight end, just because I don't know if you can trust to get 16 games out of him. And yeah, you maybe win a couple weeks because he has those huge games, but until we see him put together a full season of being healthy, I don't think you can trust him.
So I got a 2-part question for you, and it's going to kind of relate to what we were just saying. One, going into a season, Dynasty rankings, do you have a do not draft list? And
Yes.
Number 2, would Darius Geis be the first name on that list?
No.
Watch your mouth.
This is hard for me because I'm a Darius Geis truther by trade.
I'm an LSU guy. I love Darius Geis.
I think that going into, I would have been more concerned about Darius Geis heading into this season than I would have heading into next season. He was coming off an ACL injury. Yes, it was in the preseason, but he did have the infections, which prolonged his recovery time. So basically, the first 3 months where he should have been rehabbing hard, he couldn't rehab hard because he was dealing with the infections last year, which means you're pushing it out. Basically, I look at a 12-month recovery for running backs with ACL injuries. 11 to 12 months is how long it usually takes them to get back to basically a pre-injury levels of production. And even then, you're risking them not being in game shape at that point. So you pushed back. So you pushed him back 3 months, basically from the preseason, because of those infections. So now he's not going to be at 100% until 3 months into the year, basically at this point. And I think we were seeing that 2 weeks ago. And last week we saw what Darius Geis could be, given that getting him back to that pre-injury production level from that recovery from the ACL way back when. Now that's excluding the fact that he was hurt this year again, with the meniscus injury, an injury they put him on the IR for that honestly, most of the time you wouldn't put a player on IR for. I think they were intentionally giving him longer because he was already coming off the ACL and he was still recovering from that. All that being said, next year he'll now be 2 full years removed from the ACL. The meniscus, I'm not concerned about right now. Call me in 4 years. See Todd Gurley for an example on why you should pay attention to ACL and meniscus injuries early in a season or early in a career. But I think that, this MCL doesn't work. The team's bad. They're terrible. There's no reason for him to be playing. The goal is to get him healthy for next year, when hopefully they have an improved offensive line, more offensive weapons to open up and space out that offense for him to run in. You've seen what he can do when he's healthy. I mean, he was averaging like 5.8 yards a carry. I mean, and I still believe watching those games, that was not peak Darius Geis. He did not look as fast as he looked when he was at LSU. He's still getting that speed back. We haven't seen the final form of Darius Geis, which I think we could see next season if he gets a full training camp in of basically health, conditioning and getting his legs back under him. I'm disappointed because I was hoping we would see that by the end of this season, but again, it just didn't happen. So I think that. No, Darius Geis would not be on my list of do not draft players. I do have a list of guys that I won't draft because of injuries. I will tell you that Alshon Jeffrey is probably going to be on there next year. Will Fuller, we're going to wait and see, but he might be on there next year, because my biggest thing is I want guys that are consistent and that are going to give me a floor play every single week. If you look at any of my fantasy teams, I want as much depth and consistency as possible. I don't want the guy that's going to score me, 25 points one week and 0 points the next week, because ultimately that guy only gets you 50% of your wins. I want the guy scoring, between 12 and 15 every week. And maybe I'll have 1 or 2 guys, your Lamar Jacksons or your Christian McCaffreys, the top end guys that are winning you weeks. But the rest of your team should be made up of guys that you can trust, your Julian Edelman types, the guys you can just trust to get you. James White's another one. I don't know why I keep naming Patriots, but because they're consistent. That consistency is what wins. So I don't know if there's anyone that I can say for certain. Alshon would be one. that I probably won't be drafting next season. Not that I was really interested in drafting him anyway, but trying to think if there's Paris Campbell. I have a hard time trusting him. He came into the league with some injury concerns. I know there's a lot of people that are, really high on him going into next year for Dynasty. I'm probably trying to move him, to be honest with you. He had a history coming into the league of 4 or 5 injuries that I found. Basically every year I go through injury histories for Dynasty 101. And this year, hopefully I'm going to try to expand that data to as many people as I can. We'll see if anybody bites and wants to pay me to let them use my injury data. But I collect injury data on college prospects. I had about 215 guys from last year's draft, about 115 offensive guys and about 100 defensive guys. And then I assess their injury risk and decide, basically give them a grade on how likely they are to be injured at any given point in their career and how much you can trust them from year to year. So that has been very successful. I've been my buddy Debro will tell you that it's a little scary sometimes how accurate some of that stuff is, but it's the best predictor we have of future injury. Injury history is the best predictor that you have as far as predicting future injury. So
let's talk about that a little bit there, because if I'm not mistaken, you go back even to their high school playing days.
I have found, if I can find it, and it's everything I find is public knowledge. It's just, it takes a long time because if it is published and I can find a source for it, I will include it. I will not include message boards, but I will include high school newspapers. Absolutely. Preston Williams, a guy that a lot of people were high on, he blew his knee out in high school. And that's part of the reason why his recruiting was so messed up. Everyone talks about how he was an elite talent, but he had a lot of off the field issues. Well, part of the reason why he wasn't recruited as highly as he was, even with the off the field issues, is because he blew his knee out in high school. And we don't know what that knee looks like. But the report I found was that it was a significant injury, which caused him to redshirt. That tells me it's a multi-ligament injury, which means down the road, that's going to affect him. And we've seen now that injury bug has crept up on him. And he's had, I cannot remember for the life of me. Did he tear his ACL?
Williams this year?
Yeah. I should know this. I'm going to find it
real quick. That sounds right.
I believe he tore his ACL, which, again, given his injury history, let me see if I can. I'm sure I can find this.
Yeah, I'm going slow here. Yeah, ACL.
Yeah, so he tore his ACL. Well, guess what? If you have an ACL tear and you blow your knee out in high school, you're 20% more likely to blow your ACL out again. So that. Again, injury history predicting future injury there a little bit. So if you knew that going into the year, it explains why he, again, along with some of the off the field stuff, it explains why maybe he slips in the draft. Same thing with a guy like Darius Geis. We were all questioning his character. I don't think anyone was questioning his talent. But he had some knee issues. He had some injuries in college that I think, had I been able to get in and see the x-rays and see the MRIs, I may have been able to tell you, like, hey, maybe this isn't quite worth the risk. I don't have access to that stuff. I only have access to what's public. Just like everybody else, I'm just crazy enough to spend hours and hours and hours finding this stuff. But yeah, I do. If I can find it and it's public knowledge, I can usually find it, especially with the big name guys. Some of these small school guys, there's just nothing on them. I mean, there's just no way for me to get the stuff. I have every year I've got a few players that I know are going to go high in the draft that I just can't find anything on because they play for friggin' Malamute College and Western Wyoming. Like, I just have never heard of, and they don't have good reporters reporting anything on them. So usually though, I have a pretty, I say that it's the closest thing to an NFL medical that you can find on the market, and you can get it for like $4. I mean, it's well worth the investment if you're spending any money on Dynasty to get a hold of this injury database, because For me, at least, it was the difference between ranking Christian McCaffrey number 1 over Leonard Fournette, which I think has paid off in spades. It was also the difference between Nick Chubb versus Sony Michel versus Darius Geis. And I had them ranked basically Barkley, Chubb, Geis, Michel, and in a time where a lot of people were on Michel high. I was like, you are not paying attention to what's happening here. I'm more worried about Michel than I am about Chubb. And everyone thought I was crazy because Chubb had the horrific knee injury that everyone remembers. But his ACL was intact, and people don't get that. The fact that his ACL was intact makes that less significant. And even though it looked horrendous, it was not as significant as some of the things that have happened to Sony Michel, who tore his ACL in high school, which nobody wanted to talk about until after the fact. I argue after I found it and brought it back to light. But it's fascinating stuff. The more you dig into it, every year that I've done it, I've gotten better at it and gotten more prospects in. My hope next year is, my hope is to get about 250. If I can get 250, again, it's just adding. It's one more piece of the puzzle that I don't think enough people talk about. And it could be the difference for your dynasty team between a Christian McCaffrey or Leonard Fournette. And I would argue that, that could be the difference between winning a championship and not. So, do I have do not draft list? Yes. Sorry, you asked me 2 questions. I answered with like 5 answers. So that's my fault. I like to talk too much.
No, that was really good info. And in fact, I have one more guy that I want to ask you about. And one of those guys, you talked about guys that we can count on, guys that are consistent. A guy that was really consistent that we could count on at the beginning of the season was Tyler Lockett.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, he has an injury that he ends up going to the hospital for, and he's not as good. Now, one of my favorite players that I loved and he blew up and it was great, but it flamed out quickly was Hakeem Nicks. And it was that lower leg compartment syndrome that I think really took him out, or from my understanding. That was mentioned with Tyler Lockett when he first went to the hospital, that compartment syndrome. Have you heard that? Have you seen that anywhere? Has that been a part of what you've seen with Lockett? And could that explain why his production went from being very consistent and being very good and one of the most reliable targets for Russell Wilson to now it seems like he's all time getting any more than 4 or 5 targets?
Have I heard it? Yeah, there was some speculation that maybe he was dealing with some type of compartment syndrome. Now, compartment syndrome is one of the more brutal conditions to look up. If you're squeamish, don't look it up, because basically what happens is there's some type of trauma to the lower leg, the shin area. It can happen anywhere in your body, but usually it's either the upper arm, but most likely it's in the shin. And what happens is basically that compartment starts swelling and pushing everything out. And that pressure can actually completely occlude blood vessels. It can occlude nerves, which can cause serious damage to both, and can actually, if you don't treat it, it could lead to basically you losing your limb. So it is very serious. And there's no real pinpoint on what exactly causes it, but it's some type of trauma to the area, and then basically your body responds with just ballooning your leg up. The reason I say don't look it up is because
I'm going to look it up now.
You shouldn't look it up.
No doubt.
The reason I say don't look it up is because when you have compartment syndrome, really the only thing they can do for your leg, and this is kind of gross, and I don't think people realize what it is. And they didn't do this with Tyler Lockett, obviously, because it would have ended his season. But basically your leg swells, and then the only way to save your leg basically is to give that place somewhere to go. So they just make a big ass cut. Basically, that's the way I can describe it. Sometimes 2 or 3 big ass cuts. And then basically it swells your muscles outside of that cut until they calm back down and everything goes back in. And it is
kind of like going to Humpty's or Perkins and getting your bangers burnt and split. Is that kind of the theory? You cut it right down the middle to relieve that pressure.
It's not right down the middle. It's basically down the side. And it is It's disgusting. I mean, it's one that you learn about it. When I was in PT school, we learned about, kind of how to look out for this, because it is serious. I mean, we're talking about possibly losing your leg. But it's gross, man. I mean, it's a big ass cut, and you have to leave it open. You can't like cut it and then like suture it right back up. You have to leave it open until the swelling goes down. So, I'm sure that is too much information for most people. But when you talk about compartment syndrome, I don't think people really recognize, like, it's kind of obscure, and I don't think people realize like what the best way to fix it is to literally just cut the leg open and let it swell as much as it wants. There's no other way to really fix it, or you lose your leg. You decide. And usually those cuts can get affected. It is not a good thing. I don't think that's what Tyler Lockett had. I think they may have been worried about it. Maybe it was swelling, and he was maybe showing some of those early signs that could be the case. But I haven't seen that with him specifically. Now, as far as his play, it hasn't really looked good since he had that initial shin injury. I mean, he blew up in week 9. 13 catches, 152 yards, 2 touchdowns, had 100 yards the week before that, 61 yards and a touchdown the week before that, 75 yards, 51 and a touchdown, 51, not a great game, but 154 and 1 before that. So he was going over 50 yards or a touchdown in every single game, basically this season. And then he has this shin injury. He goes 3 for 20. Yeah. In week 10, he went 3 for 26. And then since then, he's only had 5 catches total.
Yeah. So
it's there's very, very rarely with injuries is there a coincidence. I mean, it's he just happened to stop getting targeted after that. No, that's not really how it works. Him and Russell Wilson have a very good rapport. They trust each other, and Wilson trusts him. And I think that if he was at 100% and he was creating the same amount of separation that he was earlier in the season, he would be getting peppered with targets, because Russell Wilson throws the ball to the dude that's open. And right now, Tyler Lockett isn't open, which tells me he's losing something, whether that is separation, speed, whatever it is. Something's bothering him to the point where he's not getting open the way that he was before.
Those are some deep ass cuts. Sorry, when you guys are talking, I'm out Googling
Dude,
images.
I told you not to look it up.
I'm not looking it up. I'm taking your advice.
Dude, don't look it up. It's freaking. I told you it's like gnarly. Look,
So, like, what I had a
coach is
bicep.
like,
No, I'm good with this. I had a bicep surgery, and I watched the distal bicep repair on YouTube. I'm like, okay, it's just a little cut. I was thinking something like that, where they just do a little inset. Like, they go
it's
right
like
down there, man.
It's like from the knee to the ankle. It's
And it's like right through, man. It's like you can almost put a straw through to the other end.
Yeah, I told you not to trifle with it, man.
You can't tell me not to do something, expect me to do it.
That one's like, dude, I'm out on this. I shouldn't have asked. I asked, but I shouldn't have.
Like, you can literally see everything in there.
I told you, man. It's brutal. The goal now is if we just keep talking about it until Calvin just freaking pukes all over the place. We're going to get a live barf on camera. It's going to be awesome.
That will be worth it right there. Like, you got to Google this.
Yeah, dude, it's brutal. I told you it was. You freaking should have listened to me when I said it the first time.
Well, I didn't doubt that at all, but it's like a train crash. You can't just not expect me to look at it. I know there's some horrible things that could possibly be going there, but I'm going to look. It's human nature.
It's pretty brutal.
It's nature.
It's pretty brutal. Probably one of those things you don't want to happen to you or anyone you care about, because it's pretty brutal.
No, and it looks like even after it heals and stuff, you can clearly tell something nasty happened there. Like, all my post surgeries, the scars, they're there, but they're not really there. You know what I mean? These things, it's like a flesh-eating disease. Someone took a chunk out of it, like a big-ass horsefly that's like the size of an actual horse with wings, took a bite out of you. That's what the scar looks like after the fact. Like, it's...
Yeah, which is why I said if Tyler Lockett had this, he wouldn't have played.
We would have. We definitely would have. We definitely would have heard
returned.
about this.
So it's pretty amazing. Hakeem Nicks was able to even play after that, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I haven't, I wasn't in the injury game at that point, so I don't know for sure if that's. I'm gonna look it up now because I'm just curious. Was that actually what Hakeem Nicks was? He had.
Yeah. I mean, well, we're going back a little ways now. That's the only place that I ever remember compartment syndrome ever coming up before. So it's got to be that.
Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of stuff with that. Yeah, I would guess that he did.
Yeah,
I would guess that he did. I've never really seen. Well, wait a second. Now that you say that, I do have a little bit of an article here that might be able to tell me about compartment syndrome in NFL players. Eddie Royal had compartment syndrome.
Wow.
Oh, no way. I loved Eddie Royal.
Jason Taylor had compartment syndrome at one point. He missed just 3 weeks.
Dang.
He did end up with a serious infection. So again, that's why I was telling you, you can't just open someone's leg up and not expect it to get infected.
Sure.
Hakeem Nicks, again, missed 2 games, but it looks like that was, yeah, it's kind of weird. The way they test for this is basically they stick a needle and pressure how much pressure is in your leg. And that's pretty brutal. Again, I don't deal with any of that stuff because I'm a PT. So unless you're working in the hospital, you're not really dealing with big leg wounds like that. Luckily, I work in outpatient, so I don't have to. I get them after the fact, after they've already been cleaned up with all that stuff. I don't deal with any of bodily fluids if I can avoid it.
So speaking of swollen members and stuff like that, Patrick Mahomes' hand. Where do you think I was going, Kelvin? Come on. This is a family show. You seen my kid in the background earlier.
Calvin's
You're not going to segue from compartment syndrome to whatever you're thinking down there.
Hey, you said it.
So Patrick Mahomes had a little bit of a scare there. It sounds like he's going to be okay. Probably his regular self, but the thing I can't stop talking about is I'm not as much worried about his hand. I don't think we've seen the same Patrick Mahomes over the last few weeks after the ankle injury that he suffered and the various injuries he's suffered this year that's taking kind of a toll on him going forward. Is he a guy? I know we have to start him if you own him. You're almost obligated to do so. But is this someone you can trust? Not just because of this hand injury, but he's had a couple other injuries this year as well.
This is the way I look at it. And yeah, I do think it's at least worth discussing how since basically the ankle injury creeped up on him, now he's got the hand issue. The second half of that game, he did not look the same after he injured that hand. He was lighting them up in the first half last week, and then basically didn't look like he was the same guy in the second half. That has me concerned. As far as trusting him week to week, if he plays, man, you gotta have some big cojones to sit Patrick Mahomes in the fantasy playoffs. Much bigger than mine, because I am very much, if I'm going to die, I'm not going to die with Patrick Mahomes sitting on my bench and dropping 40 on somebody, especially not against Denver. Now, Chicago, if they were playing Chicago this week and not in week 16, maybe we'd have a different conversation, but I just don't. I mean, that's tough because we don't even have a full game from earlier this year is when he got hurt with the ankle. In week 7, he was playing Denver, and before he got hurt, he was 10 of 11 with 76 yards and a touchdown. So he realistically probably, had he been healthy, would have finished that game with over 300 yards and 2 to 3 touchdowns. So you gotta have a really good second option to sit Mahomes.
Okay, so
what if that second option was Ryan Tannehill?
That should say enough right there. Well, we're actually considering Tannehill.
It's so hard because Tannehill's played so well. I mean, it's hot versus cold right now, and
got Houston. He's facing Houston this week, which is the third worst team against the pass in the league. Denver, just shut down Deshaun Watson.
Well, here's the thing, though.
Against the pass,
Kansas City's at home, though, and that makes a difference to me. If they were in Denver, it might be a little bit different story. But I think at home, I can't imagine that he's not going to rip these guys up. But again, that hand injury, they're saying he's okay. I don't believe it. The coach has come out and said there's no break. Okay, that's good, but it's bruised up pretty bad. Yeah, that's great, except that he can't grip the ball. I mean, he literally, his hand's so fat because of the swelling and things that he can't grip the ball. He's probably not going to practice this week. That is, God, that's tough. If you have a better option, I'd be strongly considering it. I would say that Mahomes is, I would not expect Mahomes to drop a top 5 fantasy week this week. Just this week. I'm not saying for the rest of the season. I'm saying this week, I would probably put him at a low-end QB1, and I would not be surprised if he dropped a QB2 week on us, and there were 12 quarterbacks that played better than he did. And that's assuming he plays, which I don't think you can assume yet. They're saying he might play, but again, I think this is eyeing up for game time decision. If his hand isn't feeling right, he isn't going to play. There's no reason for them to play him. There's no reason for them to risk it. Give him another week, let his hand rest, and then let him, basically play after that. So I don't know. That'd be tough.
Speaking of big balls here, where are you at with Stompy and Lamar Jackson this week? Because you'd have to have pretty big balls not to start Patrick Mahomes. What about Lamar Jackson, who's probably the highest scoring quarterback in most dynasty and most fantasy football formats? He didn't escape week 14 there without injury as well, and his tight end there, Mark Andrews.
Yeah, Jackson popped up with a quad injury, which he had on basically that he got hit on that play where I think he had a 61-yard touchdown to Hayden Hurst. It just sounds like something Lamar Jackson would do. The only thing that worries me about Jackson specifically is that he plays on Thursday night against the Jets.
That's where I'm kind of heading with this. Yeah.
And that short week, again, if he's playing, I don't think that you can make I don't think you can make a good argument against playing him over most quarterbacks. If this limits his rushing upside, we could possibly finally see a Lamar Jackson floor game this year, which we have not seen yet. So we haven't seen a Lamar Jackson floor game because he's either scored a ton, he's been highly efficient throwing touchdowns all year, or if he isn't highly efficient throwing touchdowns, he's running for 100+ yards and scoring a touchdown on the ground. So from a fantasy perspective, I think if this quad is bothering him, Thursday night game, we could see his lowest scoring output of the year. Not saying the Jets defense is any good, but they could be good enough to slow him down. And if he's not running the way he normally would, that has me seriously concerned, because I still think, while I think he is a better, more accurate thrower than I thought he was coming into the year, he has been better than that. I still worry. I mean, his last 3 games, he hasn't had to throw for, he's only thrown 1 game this year over 300 yards in the air. So if you have to make him basically revert back to throwing, could he still light you up? Absolutely. But it's less likely than if he has the rushing ability as well.
Okay. So you're starting Lamar Jackson unless you got a Ryan Tannehill to back him up, basically. Same situation as Mahomes.
I'm probably not. I'll be honest with you. I'm probably not benching Mahomes or Lamar Jackson in my playoffs. Ride or die. Let me die with those guys in my starting lineup, then get cute in the playoffs and lose.
Will he have Mark Andrews to throw to?
I don't think so. I don't. If this was a
Sunday game,
I think he would play.
I would agree with that there. Yeah,
because it's a Thursday game, I don't know. I think I'm going to take that back. I do think he's going to end up playing. He has returned to practice. He practiced on Tuesday. That's a good sign. The fact that they're letting him practice in any capacity, even though it's limited, is a good sign that he'll probably play. He's dealing with a contusion on the inside of his leg. That's a pretty sensitive area, but I would say Andrews probably plays, but I would expect I wouldn't expect him to be as explosive downfield as what he normally would be just with this injury and the short rest. That Thursday night injuries going into Thursday night are always a crapshoot. These guys could both prove me wrong, but man, you're going to be feeling like crap if you go into the year, go into your playoff matchup and these two don't produce for you.
No, I know the matchup's not great on the Jets side of things. Is Le'Veon Bell going to be available?
Bell has been chirping a little bit about not getting enough touches. The jury is out on if he was dealing with an illness. Is he dealing with an illness or is he just sick of playing for the Jets? That's my question. I think he probably plays, given the circumstances. They don't have any reason not to play him if he's healthy. But yeah, I think it is funny that, they're basically saying that he's going to be on the block this off season. I don't see why they wouldn't, if he's asking for touches,
run him to the ground.
Let him showcase. If he still thinks he's worth that, they're going to try to move him. Why would you keep sitting him? Why wouldn't you just say, hey, all right, go prove what you're worth, and we're going to try to trade you in the offseason. You don't want to be here. We don't want you here. Here's a ton of touches. It's not like they're probably not going to win this game either way. So, I don't see why they wouldn't just give him the touches and let him showcase his talent to the rest of the league.
So
as I sip my Steelers cup.
Yeah, well, that's a nice little segue there. I was trying to set you up here for this. So there's a player for the Steelers coming back this week. Unfortunately for him, he's going to have Tre'Davious White all over his ass.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Tre'Davious White's already got the play sheets from Pittsburgh, so.
Poor Juju.
Juju returning. I know he's got Duck Rogers throwing him the ball. But.
And here's the thing. Even as a Steelers fan, I think I have to be realistic with what's about to happen here. Juju's coming off a multi-week injury where he's missed multiple weeks now with this knee injury. He's returning to an offense that hasn't thrown for I don't think that they've thrown more than one touchdown pass in a game since Hodges has taken over as the quarterback. He gets a matchup with Tre'Davious White, arguably one of the three worst cornerback matchups that you can have. And sure, Juju can move in and out. They can try to move him away from Tre'Davious White as best they can, but ultimately it's not going to matter because I don't think there's going to be enough passing offense here to make Juju more than a risky wide receiver 2 option. I would not be surprised if Juju drops a total dud on us. That hurts me as a Steelers fan. I think the Steelers are still going to win. It's going to be an ugly game. Probably I'm gonna throw this out there. Defensive score for the Steelers, and they're going to win 18-12. You just wait. I'm calling it
18-12.
I'm going to disagree with that.
18-12. Steelers win. And continue arguably the greatest coaching performance of the NFL this year in Mike Tomlin, who's winning without any good players. With his third-string quarterback and his fourth-string running back and without his best wide receiver and with a tight end who doesn't know how to catch footballs, Mike Tomlin, MVP of the year, coach of the year. I'm calling it right now.
I will say it was more impressive when they were getting wins with Mason Rudolph because he's even worse. He's
terrible.
He is horrible.
Yeah. Here's the thing, and I talked with somebody else about this. One of my really good friends is a big Steelers fan too, and I said, "How can you be mad with what Hodges is doing right now? He's literally doing exactly what you want a third-string quarterback to do. Just don't lose the game." As long as you don't lose the game, even if we lose the game, as long as it wasn't your fault that we lost, I'm okay with it. Like, hey, we're playing our third string quarterback and our second string running back and our, two wide receivers that have less than 3 years of NFL experience are our main two pass catchers. Like, I was not expecting a win on any given week. As long as their third string quarterback isn't the reason we lost, he hasn't thrown 3 picks. Like, I think he's doing a pretty good job. Like, I think Devlin Hodges is doing exactly what I would want him to do. Do I think he's going to win us a Super Bowl a la Nick Foles? Probably not. Definitely not. But wouldn't that be a cool story if he did? No, I'm just kidding.
It would be a cool story.
It would be you'd have a movie made about that, right?
Yeah, heck yeah, it would.
That would absolutely yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So that just has Hollywood written all over it.
Here's my thoughts. If Tomlin can beat the Buffalo Bills, he is absolutely my front runner for coach of the year, hands down.
I think he's definitely going to get some votes regardless.
Oh, absolutely. He's definitely in the conversation. He cannot not be in that conversation. I still like what Mike Vrabel's been doing in Tennessee.
Yeah.
It's hard to argue that. You can make a case for both. If Tomlin can beat the Bills, which I do not see happening, but I've been preaching.
I could see Harbaugh winning too.
Harbaugh definitely deserves some
for the Ravens. I mean, just because he's changed his offense completely. The defense is playing incredible. The offense is playing incredible. Like, I think he has a fair chance. I think there's a few guys that have a fair chance, but I don't think you can ignore what Mike Tomlin's doing with literally nothing. Like, he's not doing.
But like I said, I've been preaching on. I've been an honorary member of Bills Mafia here pretty much the whole season. I've said they're one of the.
I hope Josh Allen just ruins it for you.
He could. That's a very strong possibility. I've said the Bills are, in my opinion, in the top 3 teams in the AFC right now. I still stand by that. It's hard to really – you can make an argument one way or the other, but you'd be wrong. And Juju Smith-Schuster, if you're right now in the semifinals in most of your fantasy leagues and you've got there without Juju, keep away from Juju.
Yeah.
It's that simple. You've got better options out there than him. Yeah. I would not be trusting him.
Now, if the injury apocalypse has hit you – like it has me, I'm like, oh, thank God, at least I have Juju coming back. He might be able to pull something off here, maybe.
And Juju, like we all know, he can make that one big play. He can score you a touchdown on 80 yards on one catch is all he needs.
Yeah.
He has that ability. The James Washington thing too, right? James Washington is like, let's just throw a dart and let's hope for the best, because he's another one of those guys Pittsburgh has who can catch a long pass on one. He only needs Will Fuller, another example. We'll talk about him real quick when we go into rapid fire. But those guys, all they need is one catch, and they can take it to the house anytime. And Juju has that ability. I just don't see it with Tre'Davious White. They're going to have to get him off Tre'Davious to make anything happen. So we'll see how that goes. It's going to be an interesting matchup because I do.
That's assuming his knee holds up too. I mean, there's a lot of assumptions here with a good Juju game. Like I said, I would say he's a risky wide receiver 2 this week.
So speaking of risky, a guy I like, and he's definitely a guy I'm not drafting, but I might pick him up on waiver wires from time to time when I see him there, is Will Fuller. I won't draft him on my team, but if I see him on the waivers, I will pick him up and start him when he's healthy. When he's healthy, he can contribute. When he's not healthy, which is probably, 70% of the season most times, he's a guy, I think this week was he maybe 50-50 at best for week 15.
Yeah, I'd say he's dealing with a hamstring strain. I would say that.
No, Will Fuller with a hamstring injury?
Hey, man. Yeah. I've probably said that 100 times in the last 3 years, but I don't expect – I would say it's probably closer to 60-40 60% being he doesn't play. So, gosh, yeah, another one of those guys that you can't trust week to week. I mean, that hamstring it can't hold up. And again, it's one of those injuries that every time he gets one, he's predisposed to get another one down the road. So it just keeps piling on for Will Fuller, which is a shame because when he's healthy, he looks pretty darn good.
What about, let's talk here quickly, Jameis Winston. I think he had a fracture in his hand. He came back to the game and he played with.
He's got some type of thumb fracture. They say it's pretty minor. They're expecting – he got a second opinion. It looks like he's going to play. So I think you could this is going to be hard. you can trust Jameis to be Jameis. So he's probably going to get 4 touchdowns and 4 interceptions, and you're going to live with the even of,
That's a 2 touchdown spread.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I think that he's still Jameis. I don't know if this is going to really affect him to the point where I'd feel fine starting him in a 2 quarterback league as my second quarterback, because who knows, maybe he only has 2 interceptions to his 4 touchdowns. I mean, it could be a good week for you. So you're going to have to live with it. He's one of those guys you live with the outcome. Hopefully he gets you this great week, but if he throws 4 interceptions and gets you negative points, like, hey, that's what you get for playing the Jameis Winston lottery.
Even if he's healthy, that's the same situation, right? It doesn't matter if he's injured or healthy. You're still playing Russian roulette with Jameis Winston.
I mean, basically, I always think of it as like, you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. So that's I don't have Jameis Winston on any of my dynasty teams, if you can't tell. He would be the absolute antithesis of what I like to do when I'm building fantasy teams in terms of consistency. So I'm out on Jameis. Sorry.
Okay, the Bears, in the Bears game there, David Montgomery was in the medical tent there towards the end. How are we feeling about him moving forward?
David Montgomery has been kind of one of those guys that I don't know how I feel about him just as a player. Not just this is without the basically without the injury, which I'm looking up right now, because I'll be honest, I got off work at like 7:30, so when you called me on, I'm like, I'm going to just wing most of this. I don't know if David Montgomery is fast enough to be an elite NFL running back. I don't know if he has the breakaway speed that will ever make him more than basically a volume, grinded out running back. And I think he is talented. I think he was a better college running back than he is an NFL running back, because I don't think he has breakaway speed. And if you don't have breakaway speed, you're never going to be, even with the volume, you're never going to be, a top 5 dynasty asset for me at running back.
He's essentially Chris Carson with draft capital.
Hey. We don't talk about Chris Carson in that such negative light. Okay.
Hey, I live everywhere.
You don't say that. But that is who I was thinking of. I'll be honest. He's better at holding on to the ball than Chris Carson is. I think he's a little bit better as a little bit more fluid as a pass catcher. But again, if you don't have that explosive ability, it doesn't matter how good you can hold on to the ball. If you can only run 5 yards before someone catches you out of the backfield, you're not going to be this like amazing pass catcher in the league. I mean, it's just, it's kind of laughable. The fact that they haven't been able to incorporate Tariq Cohen more in the passing game, because it's like, dude, he's so much more explosive. He's so much better for your team. I think that's part of the reason why the Bears are struggling, is that they drafted David Montgomery to be this kind of, oh, well, we don't have to take this guy off the field. We can just leave him on the field. It's like, yeah, but just because he can hold on to the ball when you pass it to him doesn't mean that he's like an effective pass catcher out of the backfield. I watched Tariq Cohen take a ball out of the backfield and run 50 yards last season because he's literally faster than anybody else on the field. So that's from a injury perspective. It looks like he's dealing with a leg injury. He's had ankle injuries kind of off and on as the season's progressed. So I'm guessing this is probably something to do with that. I don't expect he misses any times. And he gets a pretty nice matchup with the Packers run defense, which hasn't been really that good for most of this year. So volume, dude. Volume is it's king in fantasy football. I'm amazed that we've seen him get so much volume, and people are still talking about David Montgomery. He's just like Josh Jacobs. It's like, yeah, he's getting the volume, but he's showing you exactly what he is, which is a committee running back, a grinded out running back. And that is ultimately, I would argue that there are probably going to be at least minimum 5 running backs in the 2020 class that are better than David Montgomery at what David Montgomery does. So if they draft DeAndre Swift or somebody else, say they want to move on from Tariq Cohen, they want somebody that's more explosive, even more explosive. And the Bears have made poor decisions in the past. Look at Mitchell Trubisky and trading up for him. I would say there are 5 running backs that I can name off the top of my head right now that I would take over David Montgomery catching passes out of the backfield and probably running through tackles as well. So he could be a guy that is unexpected casualty of this 2020 running back class, which is shaping up to be very, very, very legit. So I don't know. Injury wise, I think it'll be fine, but talent wise, I'd probably be trying to trade him right now in Dynasty. If I can get a 2020 first for him, sign me up.
Yeah, I would agree with that there too. You take a look at some of those names that are coming up here, and I'm just trying to spitball off the top of my head here. DeAndre Swift, Etienne, J.K. Dobbins, Jonathan Taylor. I'd even take Najee Harris ahead of David Montgomery.
Ooh, that one's a little bit closer for me. The other guy I was thinking, you said Etienne, right?
Yeah.
I was thinking Chuba Hubbard, but
from where? The Canada. We have a Canadian on. Oh yeah, he's from just north of where I'm at.
I didn't know this.
Yes, he is. He's Canadian.
But I would probably consider him there as well. And we could keep going. That's the crazy thing about this running back class that we'll see if any of these guys return to school. But I mean, I can tell you right now, Jonathan Taylor is a beast. DeAndre Swift is a beast. Travis Etienne, I don't think is in beast category, but he's damn fast and he's a heck of a lot more explosive than most of the running backs in the league right now.
He had at least 4 60-plus yard touchdowns this year.
Yeah, I mean, he's a freak. If you give him running lane, it's over. Chubb Hubbard, I think, is shaping up to be a very good running back. Who's the guy I'm missing? J.K. Dobbins. Look at what J.K. Dobbins is doing right now. You want to talk about an immediate upgrade, both in passing and running for most teams. J.K. Dobbins I think he's going to fall in probably the 2nd or 3rd round, most likely 2nd round. He's going to be a star at the next level. And that's just that's just the top 5 guys. We're not even talking about Keyshawn Vaughn, who I think is another guy who could be, we're not talking about Kylan Hill. There's 7 or 8 other guys on top of who we've already talked about that I think are going to take jobs in the NFL next year. So it's just bonkers. The more I think about it, the more I'm like, 2020 first for David Montgomery, sign me up, because if I can get one of those 5 running backs, they're probably going to be a better position. And I don't see his position getting any better than what it is this year.
That's before even talking about Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I mean, gosh.
Exactly. Another one of those guys that, while not at the elite level, he's looked damn good.
Yeah, I'm an LSU guy, so I love him.
It's just wild to me. This class is going to be such a breath of fresh air at running back and wide receiver, which is it's unreal, because we haven't seen a class like this in a long time. Even at quarterback, I think we're going to see possibly 3. I put the over under on 4 quarterbacks in the first round, and I think that each one of them has, similar to last year's quarterback class, I think each one of them has a legitimate case to be the number 1 quarterback, outside of maybe Tua with his injury issues, but that's a totally different podcast. We'll have to talk about that in the off season. I think Joe, if I'm arguing right now, Joe Burrow is the QB1 for me right now.
Yeah.
And I think he's going to end up being the first quarterback taken, similar to Baker Mayfield. I think once you get into the numbers and what he's doing, it's going to be a no-brainer that he's going to be the number 1 overall pick. I say no-brainer only because I personally think that Chase Young should be the number 1 overall pick, because I think he's the best player in college football. And I think he's probably a top 10 player in the world right now at his position. So you can depend. Quarterback's more important, but
yeah,
you could argue that Chase Young is legit that good. So he's a freak. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with that draft. I'm already excited about draft. You can tell that I'm already moving on to dynasty drafts, because I'm so excited.
Well, funny because we're next week on the show.
My favorite part of the year.
Next week on the show, we got Jason Waltner coming in, and I want to take a really, you brought up this 2020 running back class. I want to take a look at the possible cap casualties at the running back position, because there's a lot of running backs who are going to be unemployed because of this class coming in. There's going to be a lot of players looking for jobs that we may not be expecting being jobless or being cut, and they're depending on where that cap is and how easy that's going to be to do.
This is such a good. It's a teaser.
It is. Don't want to give too much away, but
you don't want to give too much away. No, for sure.
Couple more guys I just want to hit on. Jared Cook, do you think he'll be ready next week? Concussion? He looked like he was out.
He was on pace for 8 touchdowns when he went down, by the way.
Yeah.
Might be a record.
Yeah, Jared Cook.
He couldn't even spell 8 after he took that hit in the end zone.
Jared Cook is like the biggest tease in fantasy at the tight end position, because it's like as soon as Drew Brees came back, it was like, oh, Jared Cook season, here we go, baby. And I don't expect him to play just based on the severity of the concussion.
He had a concussion, I think 2009, I want to say roughly.
Yeah, 2009 he did miss a game, so that's a long time ago. As far as concussions go, but the fact that he has one and he missed a game could be a good indicator for us on what is going to play out with this one. So, yeah, I mean, I would say there's a fair chance that he misses this next game.
Calvin Ridley, Dynasty next year, 100% healthy.
I don't know what's wrong with Calvin Ridley. This one is probably the scariest injury for me. Just looking at, I'm still waiting to see what happened with Alshon. I really feel like he popped his Achilles, but we'll see. It sounds like maybe he has a foot issue, so maybe he tore his plantar fascia. Maybe he has a Liz Frank injury, which could also indicate, based on the video, could have been what's wrong with Alshon. But Calvin Ridley, man, this one is tough for me because he basically just like collapsed on the sideline, and he has extreme abdominal pain, collapses, can't even walk. This is not, you don't play around with abdominal injuries. When I was in EMT, that was one of the things that I learned in school, actually. When you rolled up on a scene, if they had abdominal pain, that is like, here's the thing, everything in your abdomen can kill you. Like, if anything goes wrong down there, like, it is serious business. So the fact
you could be looking at, I'm no doctor here, but you're talking about potentially a lacerated liver, anything kidney, in there, right?
It could have been. We've seen football players with punctured intestines. I mean, we've seen liver, spleen, ruptured appendix, even. Like, there are so many different things that this could be, and we haven't. All we know is that he's out for the year. We don't know what it was. An aortic aneurysm, which I don't think is what it was, because that could have possibly killed him. Another one that you shouldn't probably look up, but if you can feel your pulse through your stomach and you can see it, like, you need to go to the emergency room right now. That's an aneurysm in your aorta. If it bursts, like, you basically just bleed out and die in like a minute. Like, it doesn't take any time at all. I don't think that's what happened with him, but I'm just mentioning all the different things that can kill you in your stomach. So, I would not. I am waiting to hear what this is, and I don't know when we're going to hear about it, but I have been kind of intermittently checking to see if any new news has come out on what this is. I'm actually on Roto World right now, and they don't have anything new outside of, he mentioned that he was going to be out for the rest of the year. So it's serious. Whatever it is, it's serious.
Well, yeah, and I think I seen something, Atlanta posted something about Calvin Ridley, send your well wishes here, kind of thing. You don't see that usually from the actual Twitter feed from a team.
That's so strange.
A player. So I found that so I'm looking, of course, we're selfish as fantasy football players. So I'm like, is this someone that you want to roster for next year? But there's so much uncertainty. You want the best for the players at the same time. But I'm kind of curious. Like, I don't know what this is. I'm really curious because they were quick to dismiss him for the season. It was quick. It was like, there was no thought process. It was like, hey, you played Sunday, Monday or Tuesday, we're announcing you're done for the season. It was like that quick.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, like, He hasn't even said anything, which tells me that he's either one, they don't want other people to know what it is, which doesn't. That's not good. Like, I mean, obviously you don't want people to know what it is, but it's not good that they won't tell us. That means it's probably more serious than just like, hey, yeah, bad case. Even if it was appendicitis, I think we would have heard about it. Like, hey, he had emergency appendectomy, something that would have told us what the problem was. All we know is that whatever it is, it's serious, and nobody knows except for the team and him, obviously. So what is it? What is it?
It's impossible to contain something. You know what I mean? Something would have leaked out by now. So that's where I'm really concerned right now.
Yeah, and I'm looking through basically the most recent anything on Twitter. Nothing, no, not a single thing. So I know it's serious and it's in his abdomen, and that could be a whole lot of different things. We've mentioned some of them. That's really all you can say. I would say it is impossible for me to put a dynasty value on him right now, because until we know for sure what it was, there's no way to know for sure what kind of future outlook he has.
So moving on, we're going to stay in the abdomen area. We're going to talk Odell Beckham Jr. Looks like they'll probably shut him down. Sports hernia.
It's just sports hernia.
I don't think it's as big a deal as everyone's making it. He had this apparently way back when, but I know lots of people who go about their normal day with hernias and whatnot. So, everyone kind of took a shot at the Cleveland Browns medical staff. They're not the Washington Redskins medical staff, okay? Let's get that straight right off the get-go. But, they'll probably shut him down from the season. The Browns are not in a position for playoffs or anything like that. So he's likely going to be shut down for the season. Your thoughts?
I mean, I think this is a pretty lackluster end for a guy that's as talented as OBJ is, but
there's also rumors he wants out of Cleveland.
Well, yeah, rumors. I mean, I think it's pretty clear at this point that he wants out of Cleveland. But we don't know. Maybe he just isn't jiving with this head coach, and maybe the solution is you find a new head coach. Obviously, Freddie Kitchens isn't getting it done. If they brought in
about 90% of Cleveland is not jiving with Freddie Kitchens right now.
Right.
You bring in a different coach. Maybe this isn't an issue. This is a non-issue with OBJ. Sports hernias can be incredibly painful for athletes. So I won't say that it is an illegitimate reason for him to be shut down. I do think it's interesting that he's been playing with it, but now all of a sudden it's like, hey, I'm not going to play with this. I think he's trying a little self-preservation. I don't think they have anything to play for. And I think I think that is playing a role in some of these. We're seeing it all over the league now. These teams that don't really have a chance of making the playoffs start shutting people down left and right, because they don't give a crap about our fantasy playoffs.
No, these are investments. These players are their investments.
I mean, if you ran a dynasty team and you had to pay millions of dollars to each player on your team, and you had to decide if they played or not through an injury, you would maybe make a more pertinent, a more cognizant decision on their long-term outlook if you play them or not, unless of course you're the Minnesota Vikings, and then you just make your own rules and you play people that shouldn't be played. But yeah, I would say it's probably a legitimate injury. It's one of those things that he could probably play through if he wanted to. If they were in playoff contention, we would have never heard about this.
We would have actually seen something probably on an injury report at some point too.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think you hear anything. I don't think that you hear anything about this really. If this was a playoff contending team, my personal opinion.
Ryan Griffin.
What did you have to jog my memory? I know I talked about this. Yeah, I would say
probably out this week on a Thursday night again.
Yeah, on a Thursday, very unlikely he plays.
And now my big one here, Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, I knew it.
Now he took a shot before the game. ready to go. And you know what it's like. You take that shot. You don't feel
You
nothing
feel like
anymore.
$1,000,000.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong.
Most of you feels like you could do anything.
Yeah, once you get that shot, there's no more pain. You're ready to go. He was ready to go. He took the shot. He was going to play. Then the Raiders kind of said, "You know what? You're our investment. We're gonna sit you this week with that fractured shoulder that you got going on."
First round investment.
Yeah,
this isn't just your normal run of the mill running back investment. This is a first round investment on a team that I was surprised. I thought they were out of playoff contention, but for all intents and purposes, they're pretty much done for the year. Unlikely that they win out and make it even close for a wild card. A lot of things would have to go right for them.
And that's why I thought it was such an interesting decision on the Raiders' part not to play him last week. They beat Tennessee. If they managed to beat Tennessee, I think Tennessee was 6-5, and the Raiders were 6-6, whatever it was.
Are they 6-6?
No, sorry. Tennessee was 7-5, I think, going into last week, right?
Yeah, I think you're right.
And the Raiders were 6-7, or whatever the numbers are.
Yeah,
they beat Tennessee. They're tied with Tennessee, or they're right there with Tennessee with 4 games left in the season. So it was kind of interesting to see them actually making the decision to shut. He wanted to play. He's ready to go. But my understanding is his shoulder was fractured in the Green Bay game.
Yes, he's been dealing with a shoulder fracture for a while. It doesn't sound like
back position.
Fracture itself is serious, but there is a chance. And now, they've even signed a third running back. So very unlikely. Everything they're telling us is that he's probably not going to play again this year because they shut him down. And I almost wonder, it's one of those things where, why would you give him the shot if you're not going to let him play?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what
you almost wonder if somebody else is making a decision that isn't directly involved in deciding if he gets the shot. This sounds like a Mike Mayock decision a little bit to me. And so I'm not sure, maybe it was you, but somebody mentioned on Twitter that it's very suspicious that they let him get the shot, but then don't play him. It's almost like the person who decided that he wasn't going to play wasn't part of the, direct contact with him. And I think what happened was they gave him the shot. They expected him to play. And then somebody, Mike Mayock, somebody higher up made the decision that, hey, you're not going to put this guy at risk. We're not going to win this year. Our plan is a 2-year plan to start competing next year. That's why we got rid of Clearmack. That's why we got rid of Amari Cooper. That's why we still have a ton of 2020 draft picks. Our plan is to compete next year. Why are you getting rid of it? He's shown us this year that he can be a stud. Yep. Like, we know we're set at running back for at least the next 3 seasons, probably longer. Stop throwing him out there just for shits and gigs. Like, you need to. We're shutting him down. Like, it's over. It's we're not going to beat the Titans. They're better than us. We're not. Even if we made the playoffs, we're probably not going to win. Like, let's make a sound investment here with this guy that we are paying a ton of money for a running back being drafted in the first round. Let's be smart with him and make sure that he stays healthy for next year when we're even more likely to compete.
And I'm okay with that.
Which makes DeAndre Washington the most important waiver wire pickup tonight.
Yes.
Yeah, I might have blown all my fab in just about every single one of my leagues at this point already.
Gosh, you know who got me? Brian Hill. Man, I was really hoping for something there. He killed my fab. Brian, it was like the back-to-back weeks of Mark Walton and Brian Hill that completely decimated my fab in most of my leagues. That turned out just horribly for me. The correct answer, if you were wondering, was Raheem Mostert, who I got for free in most of my leagues. So It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm kind of just going through my leagues right now to see what's actually available. Calvin,
Coach is like, here, let me check my waiver wires while we're interviewing you. Got to make sure I get.
Well, we got to make sure. Try and take advantage of this advice that's getting tossed out here, too, right? So, Calvin, you got any other guys there you want to talk about briefly?
I think we covered most of the.
That was a lot of carnage in week 14. That was a ridiculous amount. I haven't seen a week like that in probably a year or two. I think 2 years ago we had a plague type week too, where there was just a ton of carnage that went down.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's only on the offensive side of the ball. There was a ton of big defensive injuries as well. I know we didn't get into the
Davenport,
IDP
D
stuff,
Ford. Yeah.
but I'm sure that I'm sure that somebody will be hitting me up, knowing all my IDP guys have been messaging me about people. So I'm sure at some point, if you're into IDP and you're listening to this, follow me on Twitter and keep an eye on that kind of stuff so that I can help you out with that as well. Because it was a freaking horrible week for both sides of the ball.
Yeah. One more quick thing here. How are we doing in that sleeper bot league we got going on? I'm done. B. Marcy knocked me off here last week, so this week.
Here's the thing. So, my first IDP league ever, I did get a first round bye. I won my division. I'm 10-3, so I didn't have to play last week. I am projected to win this week. I am fully expecting to win the championship, if anyone is listening from that league. My team is stacked. I did lose a little bit of talent. Marvin Jones was on my team, and I will not be able to play Marvin Jones, so that one is going to hurt me a little bit. But I fully expect to lay waste to the rest of the team. My defensive linemen are also hurting a little bit right now, so if you could just pray that Sam Hubbard can come back and be healthy, that would be great. But I do expect to win because I am 10-3, and it's my only IDP league, so I care about it a lot. I'm cutting down my leagues. I don't know if I told any. I've mentioned it on Twitter a few times. If you are like, man, I really want this dude. He knows so much about fantasy football. I want him in my league. And you call me, expect for me to tell you no, because I don't care about your league. I don't care if it's an all industry league with 5 of my greatest idols. I'm not playing. I'm not playing. I spend too much time on fantasy football as it is. And this year I realized that, like, even though I was only in like 9 leagues, it was about 6 too many, because 4 or 5 of them I didn't care about. So, and that just made me not care about all of them, and that hurt me in a few spots. So, if you ask me to be in your league next year, I'm probably out, except for my Dynasty IDP league, which I'm now part of, because I will be back-to-back champion after I win this year. I just want the record to show.
How you doing down there, Calvin? How did you make on that league?
Well, I scored the 3rd most points in the league. Obviously had a very successful year. We don't worry about the playoffs. I won my matchup in the consolation bracket.
What bracket were you in?
Like, playoffs are doing good. I'm 1-0 in the consolation bracket. Like, said it.
Hey,
so
week 14 was a win.
I'm doing really good in the consolation bracket. Oh, bless his heart. That's, how I knew that was going to end poorly, because you started with your ranking in points.
3rd most points.
I score the 3rd most points. That is always my intro to my leagues, where I'm just playing like absolute crap. What the? Who? Anyway.
I scored 300 more points than you, Coach, and I missed the playoffs.
He missed the playoffs.
It doesn't matter, man. It doesn't matter. Look at the Chargers and the Raiders. The Raiders got a better record than the Chargers, and they've given up more points than anyone in the league. Or their points for and against, the differential. It don't matter. It's about wins and losses, man. It's all about wins and losses.
I should have had your spot. I outscored Marcy. I should have had that spot. You didn't deserve that spot.
You just enjoy your consolation bracket down there.
Coach, I'm so sad that we didn't get a matchup in the playoffs so I could crush you. I'm very upset about that.
Yeah, I was really looking forward to benching Patrick Mahomes this week.
Yeah, and I was looking forward to just destroying it even with Patrick Mahomes. It didn't matter. No, I have, in all honesty, I do feel like I've built a strong, consistent IDP team in that league, but it's one of those things where I have like probably the lowest points against that I've ever had against. Like, when teams play my team, they just don't show up. So I'm hoping that continues in the playoffs now, where the teams I play just don't show up, because I have been pretty lucky in that league at this point. Like, there's like a 700 point differential, and it's not because my team is like 700 points better than everyone I've played. It's literally just because people are putting like 100 points less than they normally would against me. So it is what it is. But at least I didn't start with, well, I'm third highest points in the league.
I started off with I lost this week. That was how I started off.
In the consolation bracket.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm doing pretty hot.
I'm going to win that bracket.
Shooting for 6th place. So, it's going to be a pretty sweet league. I'm going to do pretty good in it. No, I mean, playoffs overall, I'm feeling pretty good. I had 9 teams. I made the playoffs in 7. Outside of the one game that I absolutely blew by starting Josh Jacobs and Will Fuller, even though neither one of them played, and I lost by 10. I think I'm in the next round and 5 of the 7 that I made. So I'm okay with that. Winning championships is hard in fantasy football. Oh my gosh.
It is. I got 20 leagues and I probably might have a sniff in 2 of them.
Yeah, it is hard. I'm just hoping for, again, if I can get a championship a year, I'm good to go. And now I'm playing with so many sharks that, even the one where I'm like, hey, I won my division and I wasn't in the consolation bracket. In my IDP league with all the IDP sharks, in case nobody knew, go back and listen to the first episode of IDP Nation podcast when you learn that it's like 12 IDP guys and Ethan, the dude who's never played in an IDP league. That's the league that I'm winning. So Calvin's like, and I
am winning the consolation bracket
in points 4 and 5th lowest in points against because my defense sucks.
I'm gonna give myself a consolation trophy.
So I do have one more league I will be going into before the end of the season. With the Dynasty Vipers, I run a playoff league every year where it's like a $25 entry, and I take a percentage of the entry fees, and that goes right back to Fantasy Cares. It's kind of like the Dynasty Vipers contribution to Fantasy Cares when it's all said and done. Last year, we had 35 people participate in it, and what it is, it's only during the NFL playoffs, so weeks 18, 19, 20, 21, or whatever you want to call it there. And once you pick a player, you can't pick that player again. So you almost want to pick players who are about to lose their matchup, because if they lose, they're done. You can't pick them anymore, right? If you pick them, then you can't pick them after that either. So if you pick week 1, you take Tom Brady as your quarterback. Week 2, you take Drew Brees as your quarterback. And all of a sudden the Saints and the Patriots play in the championship. You're going with Taysom Hill as your quarterback in the final round of the playoffs. So it's kind of a different, unique kind of playoff thing I do. I put it together, and last year, like a couple of years ago, I think we had something like 25. Last year we grew to 35 guys. So the more people we get going in on this playoff pool, there obviously is more money towards Fantasy Cares when it's all said and done. So it's one of those things I'm starting to kind of get a list of people together right now. I've put it on a lot of my home leagues and my message boards, and I think right now I got 15 people, and I just put it out there on this weekend already. So usually as it gets closer to week 17, week 16, when people are officially out of their playoffs and MFL kind of rolls over with playoff league notifications on your home screen, that's usually when the numbers start to pick up there. Cool. Ethan, you want to talk a little bit more here quickly about what you got going on there? I know draft season's a big thing for you there, especially with the information you're putting together. Where can people find you nowadays?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at eTurnerFF_PT. The rookie digest, which I talked about. My hope is this year I'm going to try to get that in as many different rookie digests as possible, so that wherever you get your rookie information, hopefully my injury info will be included in that. So I'm still working out the details on how I'm going to go about actually getting that to all the different digests that are out there. But my goal is to basically be the first line of information in terms of guys coming into the league. I really truly believe I'm the only one in the market that does anything like this. Definitely to this extent. You might see an article or two about 5 or 6 guys, but nobody's going as in depth as I am on these injury histories, and it is the best way to predict future injury. All the analytics show it. You can go back and look. My last year or 2 years ago was the first year I did it. You can actually get that for free on Dynasty 101's website right now. You can go back and look and just see, basically who I thought was a risk and who I didn't think was a risk. I would tell you that players that I rated as a high injury risk in 2017, missed on average 3 games more than players who weren't rated in that season. So the data is just showing that the more I can get into it, the more data I can collect, the better I'm going to be as far as predicting future risk for injuries. And again, it's unlike anything else that's on the market. So whatever you digest you get, you should at least try to look at that. So draft season is big for me. And I think you can just tell I just love talking about prospects, and it's my favorite part of fantasy football. It's always been my favorite part of dynasty football for sure. But you can find me every week. I do an injury update. This year, that's on the Superflex show. So with John Hogue, Stompy, who we mentioned, and a few other guys there. So we do a weekly show where I talk about injuries and basically give my opinion on if a guy is going to play or not. I'm sure I'll be doing plenty of off-season stuff with him as well. I'm on all sorts of different podcasts. So really the best thing you can do is follow me on Twitter at eTurnerFF_PT and just pay attention to where I'm at and what I'm doing, because I tend to freelance from place to place as the season goes on. Whoever wants me to sit down and talk about football, I'm usually able to do so. So I'm on a lot of different shows. I don't have a ton of like my show. Maybe next year I'll just have my show, and that'll make it a lot easier for me in my time management. But we'll see.
The way it is. This episode of the Dynasty Vipers ViperCast has been the Ethan Turner show. Like a lot of this information, you've been just pounding them out left, right, and center. We've had your Twitter handle scrolling down the bottom the whole time.
So I talk too much. I'm sorry. If anyone's listening, it's like, oh my God, I'm so sick of hearing this dude.
No, I think it's been really good information. Thanks for coming on today. For real.
I appreciate you guys bringing me on. I know that, it's one of those things where this was just one of those weird weeks where I just feel like, man, I'm running all over the place. I've had a few other people kind of reach out, and I'm doing my best. Like I said, I do have a real job where I run 2 PT clinics. So the good thing about being a PT is that I have the medical experience to be able to talk about the medical side of things, but I'm obsessed with fantasy football. So that makes me different from everybody. All the other docs that want to talk about football, they're just talking to you about, from the medical side of things. My goal is to be the bridge between the two. You got to be able to talk about fantasy football, and you also got to be able to talk about the medical stuff. And I pride myself on being the best at doing that specifically. So it's cool. I've been very fortunate with the outreach the community has had. So the support that I've gotten over the last couple of years since I started doing this has been pretty great. So I'm always excited to try to contribute my little tiny baby portion to the fantasy community as a whole.
I know my one goal in fantasy football going into 2020. I like how you mentioned getting your rookie into other digests and stuff like that. My one goal in 2020 is to get a little tiny blurb in some fantasy football magazine that my home league guy brings to the draft, and they look it up, and I'm there giving them like the finger or something. But I'm in here. Yeah, you're reading my magazine. It doesn't have to be anything. I don't have to say it. It could be like Sammy Watkins sucks. That's the only thing I have to have in there. Just enough. When they open up that magazine, they're getting ready for the draft. There's my ugly mug looking back at him. That's my one goal I have going into 2020.
That's awesome. I'm
very
the commissioner of my home dynasty league prints out my dynasty rankings and gives them to everyone before the dynasty rookie draft. So it is one of those things where everybody gets a copy of my stuff, and I'm just like, oh great, here I go. And I love when I pick someone and it's not like directly in the order that they would pick you. I'm just like, hey, look, just because I rank them a certain way doesn't mean that that's how my team in this league is going to draft. Like, I already have 5 tight ends. Why would I draft Noah Fant ahead of AJ Brown? It doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Even if I think one is more positional value, just in a whole, whatever. Anyway, I think that's hilarious. So I hope that you get that, because that would be a great story.
All right, Calvin, you got anything before we sign off here? I'm trying to keep it. We're already at an hour and 40 minutes here. I
talk too much. It's my fault.
Oh, no. There's a ton of information for people here going into their push here, and for dynasty trades going forward with the guys we're talking about. So, Calvin, what do you got here for us to wrap it up? And don't say bye Jets, because that hasn't worked out well for you all season.
I would disagree. I feel like that's done now, but they had a pretty good stretch there with some good matchups. No, just follow me at Calvin and Hobby on Twitter, and love the interaction. Love to hear from you guys on there. So yeah, that's it.
All right. So for Ethan Turner and Calvin down there, I'm Coach Matt Donnelly, and we gone. This is Dynasty Vipers episode 13.